Okay, so this is lawn alternatives, replacing your grass. I'm Katie. I'm the horticulture program educator here at Cornell Cooperative Extension in Sullivan County. I'm looking forward to another productive summer of growing vegetables in our beds over there on campus. Um, but yeah, so today we'll be covering reasons why, like why are we bothering, the benefits, different options that we have, maintenance requirements, and then I'll be sharing some resources to help get anybody started that wants to take on this endeavor. Okay, so what's so bad about a lawn? Why bother, right? Well, if you think about all the time, energy, um, spent mowing, money on fuel, mower maintenance, fertilizing, watering, the cost, even if you are mowing yourself, it's 1 to 2 hours a week for about 25 to 30 weeks out of the year. If you do it yourself, if you pay someone, I don't know what the average rate is. We had somebody mowing the lawn for, I think it was like $50. Um, and they would come like they were supposed to come every week, but they never would. So it was like every 10 days they would come. But it gets expensive. Like we were both working a lot over the summer, so we didn't really have time to do it and it kept getting too long. So we finally just broke down and started paying someone, and I don't think we'll do it again this year because it is really expensive. Um, but it's a lot of work to maintain a lawn, and what are the benefits you're really getting out of it? I mean, yeah, it's nice to have some lawn, but do you really need all of that lawn? Um, it it makes for poor soil health. It's able to absorb storm water and floods much less than native grasses are. Some would say it's wasted space. I mean, listen, to each their own, I guess, right? Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I don't find big sprawling lawns very beautiful, but I guess some people do. So does anyone, I have a poll I was gonna ask. Okay. Does anyone know how much turf grass is in the United States? If you know the answer, you can put it in the chat. It's 50 million acres. That's the answer. But maybe this will be easier for you guys. I have a poll that I made. Does anybody know how many native bee species are in the United States? So there's actually about 4,000 native bees in the United States, which is a lot more than you would think, because the honeybee is really the one that's like the star. Everybody knows about that. Um, but really, the reason we all care about the reason that we're all taking this class is because we want to preserve and protect our ecology, our ecosystems, right? And a lawn is a monoculture. It does nothing for wildlife. It doesn't offer any biodiversity or species richness. Um, where's my, sorry, I'm going back to my presentation here. So to me, it's just wasted space. Um, And there's really no benefit to it. And I don't know if anyone else has noticed, but I remember in the summertime driving and, it would be like if you were in a more rural area and you were driving for, a day, your car would just be covered in insects. And it was like, sad, but also a mess. And now I feel like I don't see as many dead insects on my car. And I don't know if that's just me and, that's not everybody, but there has been a giant loss of insect biomass in the past 40 years or so. They say that we've lost anywhere from 50 to 70% of insects, which is very bad for us. We need these insects to pollinate our crops. We need them because they're an important basic part of the food web. So it's not a good thing that we are losing our pollinators and losing our insects. But your lawn is contributing to that. So if you have a lawn, you're not going to attract birds or hummingbirds, fireflies, moths, butterflies, pollinators, any of those 4,000 native bee species, or the beneficial insects that eat the pests that go after your vegetable garden. So it's not a benefit to us to have these big sprawling lawns. And I don't know, I remember being a kid and there was just I remember the fireflies being just so magical and beautiful. And I don't even really see them as much as I used to anymore. I mean, again, maybe that's just me, but I feel like it's not the same as it was. And then we have the beautiful monarch butterfly that I think they're saying that it had like 75% loss in the past 3 years. So that's that's a bad sign as well. Um, but if we're thinking about replacing our lawn, um, there's a lot of different options. You don't have to make it more work for you. You can make it less work for you. So there's native grasses that you can plant, ornamental grasses. I'm always going to push for natives because there's just so many benefits to planting natives. They're easier, they're less management, they're more resilient in our climate, and they support wildlife, they support pollinators, and they're the most beautiful, I think, too. But we can have a wildflower garden. I would, again, push for a native wildflower garden with perennials and annuals. You can do something that's called remeadowing, which we'll talk about later in the presentation. If you have a wet spot, you can make a rain garden. You can make, if you're wanting to keep a lawn-like structure, um, you can have a low mow lawn, which is in like quotations because it's not like Kentucky bluegrass or oat grass or anything, but you can still walk on it. It can still take some foot traffic, and it will also supply food for the pollinators also. So it's not just going to be this monoculture that's serving no purpose. It'll at least have flowers on it that will be useful to the pollinators. You can also do a rock garden, mulch garden. You can plant moss or some sort of ground cover. And it also doesn't have to be your whole lawn. You can just start with a small section. I think a lot of people will look at their lawn and think, well, I'm just like used to mowing and it's easy in the sense of like I already have a lawnmower and I already have, it's just already there. So why would I give myself more work? But in the long run, you're not really giving yourself much more work, maybe for like the first 2 seasons, and then it'll really just be self-sufficient and you don't really have to do much anymore after the first 2 years, and you won't be spending all that money on fuel and fertilizer and whatever else. Water, if you water I never water my lawn, I just let nature take its course, but if you do that, you won't be spending all the money on that because you'll have a self-sustaining garden that is meant to be here. So it'll go with the ebbs and flows of our climate here. But yeah, like a small section. I mean, if you have, let's say, a third of an acre or half an acre, and you just want, you want to start small, even just a 10 by 10 square or a 20 by 20 square, like cut into two pieces so that it's easy to manage. It doesn't have to be the whole thing. There's some people that do, they want to do the whole front of their house as a meadow or whatever, but you don't have to do that. Um, so there are, these are, I think I skipped a slide. Hang on. No, I didn't. So choosing a spot. Whenever you choose a spot for new plants, you want to make sure that you observe the sun exposure for a few weeks at least, but preferably over the course of a few seasons because it'll change from summer to spring to summer to fall, winter. You'll get different types of light in your space for the most part. But if you don't have that kind of time and the space kind of, you can make a good guess. At least observe it for a few days or a couple of weeks. This way you get like a real feel of how many hours of sunlight you're gonna get because there's gonna be days that are shady, there's gonna be days that are rainy, and to really see what kind of sun you get, I think it just takes more than one day of keeping an eye on it. Um, So yeah, if you have a really sunny spot, the remeadowing with a wildflower garden, ground covers, those need full sun. So I would say at least 6 to 8 hours of sunshine. If you have a space that is like a slope and it's really difficult to mow, or it's on the edge of the woods or in the edge of a bunch of trees, any spot that's like hard to mow, any spot that like kind of stays wet, um, or like a very shady spot that you don't really have a lot of luck growing grass anyway. These are good things to think about. These are, a good place to start because if you have a shady yard with a lot of trees and it stays kind of damp, you might want to do a sort of like woodland planting, which are really beautiful. You could plant a lot of moss, fern, have some sort of rock garden, a rain garden, and there's species that you can plant that will do really well in a wet spot and even help to mitigate some of that like standing water that you might have. Um, but yeah, any of the other ones like a ground cover or a meadow, flower garden, vegetable garden, depending what you want to grow, those typically need 6 to 8 hours of sunshine. Okay, so the first thing that you're going to do once you figure out what type of garden you want to plant is you're going to have to kill your lawn, which can be accomplished any number of ways. You know, Cornell has information about putting out herbicides, which I think is crazy to do because you can just get it done in a couple of months by just doing like a lasagna method or like a mulching, like just smothering the grass, which is much less work intensive also. I've done it at work, I've done it here at my house where you can put down a clear tarp and that will actually solarize a lot of the weed seeds and kill them as well because you don't want those taking over when you're trying to plant specific species in a spot. So you want to make sure that or at least try to kill some of the weed seeds or the weed plants that are probably hanging out there waiting for their opportunity to grow. Um, but yeah, you can use a tarp. A black tarp also will get pretty hot, so that'll kill a lot of the weed seeds also. That'll kill the grass for sure. But in the pat, you can also do like a rototill and just rip up the ground, and get rid of then dig it out and get rid of it that way. You can literally just dig out the grass also. But I think the best method is the lasagna method, which is like the easiest method. So the first thing you put down is either cardboard or newspaper, and that's going to block the weeds and the grass and smother it and kill it. So you place a layer of that, and then above that, you could probably start with greens or browns, but I would start with greens. And that would be like kitchen scraps, vegetables, coffee grounds, eggshells, grass clippings. Those are your greens. Those are like nitrogen-rich materials. So you put a layer of those down, and then a layer of straw or shredded paper, sawdust, dried leaves. Those are your browns. And then on top of that, you can either put a layer of mulch or a layer of topsoil. And the minimum I would say would be like 3 months. So it might be a little late to do it now. Um, but if you let that sit for about 3 months, that would be like the minimum amount of time, and you would have a beautiful planting space that would be like super rich with organic material, plenty of nutrients and micronutrients to grow whatever it is that you want to grow there. And it would be nice, loose soil that would not be compacted or have any other issues. But if you do that, you want to water it and make sure that it stays damp, not wet, kind of like a wrung out sponge, about as damp as that. That's like the perfect moisture level for pretty much, I guess, pretty much anything in gardening, but mostly when you're dealing with compost or planting seeds, you never want it like too wet or too dry. I'm just gonna take a look at but yeah, those are the ways to get rid of your lawn and get yourself started with a space that's going to be really great for planting. Okay, so mixing approaches. Um, so you don't have the list that I sounded off before. This list here, it's not exhaustive. It's not like everything you could possibly do, but it's the most popular options. Um, so a lot of people like blending some of them. So, you might have clover near your walkways because they can take the traffic. Um, a native garden in the front yard. At work, I have a native edible garden, which is really cool, which I'll show you guys pictures of later. Um, if you have a space that is kind of hilly or really difficult to mow, you can turn that into a meadow. Then you can have a vegetable garden near the house. And then if you have any low spots or wet spots, you can do moss or a rain garden fern over there, and they'll do really well. There's a ton of native, really beautiful fern that you could plant. But this is clover around this walkway here. I believe it's Dutch clover, but it looks really pretty. I mean, it doesn't always have to be like um, this really high maintenance, a lot of work alternative. You can have something like this, which takes care of itself. And even this is so much better than having just the monoculture of Kentucky bluegrass in your lawn. So these are some examples of native grasses or ground covers that you could do and plant instead of having your lawn. These maybe you have to mow them once a year. Some of them you don't even have to mow at all. You can just let them do their thing and they'll never get past 6 inches or so. Um, Not so much for the grasses, but the ground cover and the moss. And they have really strong root systems. They help prevent erosion, which grass does not do. And they provide winter interest and wildlife cover, wildlife habitat, wildlife food for foraging. I have a picture on the next slide. This is the little stem, the little blue stem grass, which is really beautiful. It's native. This is what it looks like. It's really lovely. So if you planted a bunch of these in a space in your yard, it would even offer you some privacy and some sort of, structure to the area. But they need full sun. They're drought tolerant. Pennsylvania sedge is another option. They also like they'll stay from full sun to shade. I guess you could kind of plant them anywhere. And then we have bearberry, which I think that's more of a ground cover than a grass, but that can be in full to part sun. And that one is evergreen, so it'll stay lovely all year and have like winter interest. Another example of the ground cover is creeping phlox. Some people like to do creeping thyme as well. Those like full sun, well-draining soil. That is the picture on the top, the purple with the purple flowers. They even flower and they look really pretty like that for a couple of weeks. And then the moss at the bottom is pincushion moss. I'm sure you've seen it before in damp parts of the woods or around. It likes shade, but it can take a little bit of sun. It more likes the ambient light, but it likes damp, sunken, wet ground that's slightly acidic, even like, some fallen tree branches or spots that have some decay, where you would find like mushrooms, like moss likes to be there too, near like damp stones. That's that bluegrass again. Um, Or one of the other options is the flower garden. You could do a perennial garden, an annual garden, you can do a blend. These are some examples of native species that you could plant that will do really well. I mean, with any perennial garden, annual gardens, they don't obviously take as long to establish. They'll bloom that year and they'll look great. I always say to do a blend of both because while you're waiting for those perennials to establish, which can take, usually it's like the first year you're not going to get much. Sometimes you will. Sometimes they'll flower. But the second year and the third year is when, like, the second year they're gonna look really nice, and the third year is when you're gonna be like, wow, they are really like it'll look like the picture on the right. They just will be everywhere and super big and full and lush and just look really lovely on the third year. But while you're waiting for that to happen, you can plant annuals in the meantime, and that will, you know, cover up some of the space. Like, I don't like columbine flowers. I can't stand them, but they will reseed themselves everywhere, and they are a really great filler while you're waiting for those perennials to come in and like take over. But these are some of the species that I would recommend because they're all native to the Catskill region, to, New York, pretty much most of New York. Um, but we have foxgloves, which are beautiful, anise hyssop, which you can actually make tea out of. The same with wild bergamot. You can make tea out of them too. Um, you can make tea out of echinacea also, which is on the list. And then we have yarrow, which is really nice a in a bouquet or if you bring flowers in the house, they're nice as like a backdrop to your like show flowers. Indian blanket, coreopsis, milkweed, which is going to be a host for the monarch butterfly. Bone set is a great one too. They kind of almost look like yarrow also, but they are actually deer proof and they have like a funny smell, so the deer don't like them. So if you wanted, you could plant like a barrier, like a perimeter around your garden, and that might help keep the deer away from them also. But then we have a couple types of asters, and then Joe pieweed, which is like I feel like a favorite over here. Everybody plants that. Um, Yes. So, rain garden. Has anyone ever been to Portland, Oregon? Their climate is a bit different from ours, but every house, if you walk around the city of Portland, like every single house has like a fern, rock, moss garden. It's very like fern gully. And if you have a wooded area with a lot of shade and trees and dampness, you can get this kind of same effect. Um, so This picture on the right is a rain garden in Rego Park, Queens. So rain gardens are kind of like shallow, planted, sometimes they're in like depression in the ground, and they're designed to collect and absorb stormwater runoff from impervious surfaces like, roofs and driveways, any sort of like hardscaping. Um, they act kind of like a sponge and they help reduce flooding, they help improve water quality by filtering pollutants, and they create and provide essential habitats for wildlife, for the native wildlife that we're trying to protect. Um, so a successful one will use native plants which are adapted to our soil conditions, our climate, and the water overflow that we sometimes get. Um, But yeah, they require less maintenance once they're established and they contribute to balancing our ecology. Um, but yeah, in the boroughs, stormwater runoff and street floodings are a huge problem. So they started installing these little mini like bioswales or rain gardens to help mitigate the water absorption. Like I said, this picture is in Rego Park in Queens. But the same concept can be applied to like a damp spot on your lawn. So if you wanted to deal with a place that's always flooding. You can plant some of these plants that tolerate wet soil, and they love our soil. We kind of have like rocky clay-ish soil up here. So birch really doesn't mind being wet. Willow loves to be wet, but you don't want to plant that near any sort of pipes or underground tubes or anything that you have going on because they might just like dig their little roots into it. Blue flag iris is another one that doesn't mind to be damp, swamp milkweed, and fox sedge. So those are just a couple. I can send out like longer lists if anybody's interested. But there are plants that are really great at absorbing water and do really great in a rain garden. Um, Did I pass them? Oh no, that's next. Okay. So these are kind of like more of the lawn-like options that I was talking about before. They tolerate some foot traffic. None of these grow past 6 inches. You don't even really need to mow them or do anything to them. You can just let them do their thing. There's white clover, which was in that picture before. This one here, that's the white clover. And that'll grow 4 to 6 inches. It will tolerate part to full sun. It likes well-drained, fertile soil. Creeping thyme, which is in the picture here, it loves to like grow over a ledge like that and just like travel down. Um, and they like well-drained, less fertile soils, but they need full sun and they'll grow anywhere from 2 to 4 inches. And then at the bottom, you have barren strawberry, which will not get fruit, but it will flower, like this pretty yellow little flower. Um, and those they will do okay in full sun to partial shade. And they'll take pretty much any soil. They're not very picky about their soil. But these are options for people that still want to be able to walk, because you can walk on these and they will not like just die underneath your feet. They can tolerate a little bit of foot traffic. So that's for people that don't want to give up, like, when you look out your window and you just see like sprawling green. These are great options. Um, because they're still pollinator friendly and you're not gonna have like just that monoculture of grass. Another option is rock gardens, fern gardens, mulch gardens. So mulching around a tree, if you don't want to get involved with like a garden and you just want to like remove some of the grass and maybe just like cover it up with some mulch. Mulching around trees is a great thing to do if you're a gardener. It retains soil moisture. It'll stop you from mowing near the tree, which will prevent you from like damaging the bark or, by accident, obviously not on purpose. But it reduces water evaporation. So we've had some pretty crazy weather the past couple of summers. I mean, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, but we had like 40 days in September without any, it was from like the end of August through September. We had about 40 days without any rain in Liberty. So if you have mulch around your trees, that's just going to help regulate the soil temperature. It'll keep the roots cooler in those high temperatures and drought conditions. It also suppresses weeds, which reduces competition for the tree for nutrients and water. It prevents soil erosion. And over time, obviously, the mulch will decompose and add nutrients to the soil, which can only help the tree also. Um, but yeah, it also will stop mowers from going close to the tree and foot traffic from being close to the tree, which can only compact the soil and hurt the roots. So that is a helpful thing to do if you're trying to just like reduce lawn space. A fern garden, like I said before, they don't like full sun. You kind of need them to be in a more shade, like at least part shade, part sun spot. But if you haven't, I mean, I just think they look really beautiful, like fern with some moss and some stone. They just look like really lovely. I don't know, when I went to Oregon, that always stood out to me that no one had a lawn there. Like, even though it's in the city, so the front yards are not very big, it still was like very beautiful and striking, just that no one had a lawn. Everybody had these like rock gardens or fern gardens, and they just looked really beautiful. They definitely were slippery as heck, so you had to like be careful while you're walking over there. Um, but yeah, I mean, there's different like aesthetics that you can branch out to, but these are some really beautiful ones that do work up here as long as you have like a shady spot. But those are the benefits of having like mulch around, and even just putting mulch down and like having a couple plants in there somewhere, or like a dwarf tree or something like that. That would be a great alternative to having to mow a lawn all the time. And you don't have to do any upkeep with stone or mulch. It just stays there and does nothing. So you're not even trading in for more work. You're trading in for nothing. And what about the deer? I know deer is like a huge, for me, it's groundhogs. For me, it's not deer, but um, until your garden of choice gets established, you probably are just going to need to have some sort of protection, fencing around it. They do sell like those smelly sprays that you can spray, and some people say that they work, but you have to kind of apply them like as soon as it rains, you have to reapply them. So sometimes almost every day in the summertime, um, they say that those work. But then there's also deer resistant plants and grasses. Like all of the native grasses are pretty deer resistant. And then, like I said, the bone set is deer resistant. I mean, to me, nothing is really ever 100% deer resistant because if they're hungry enough, they'll like eat anything. I mean, I've had deer and groundhogs eat marigolds, which are supposed to be poisonous. But at work, like the gardens at work, we have a lot of um black-eyed Susans, and they don't touch them there. But anyone else I talk to in the area says that they just like devour theirs and they have to protect them. So it's also depending on like what's available in the area. I think that when it comes to deer or groundhogs or rabbits, like anything that is really smelly, they are not going to touch it. Like they're not going to go near it. Like I've had basil, mint, pretty much a lot of different herbs growing, and they never get eaten. Like nothing ever goes after them. They never get eaten. Um, Even the basil, which, you know, I mean, I love the smell of basil, but uh nothing ever eats the basil, nothing ever eats the mint. The mountain mint, you don't really want to plant mint because it'll just take over, but the mountain mint is native and it doesn't really take over your garden the way that the other mint does. Um, but what you can do also is you can plant like a scent barrier. Like I plant garlic. I planted garlic at my work garden this year, and I feel like garden garlic is like the easiest thing to plant because nothing wants to really eat it. The only thing you have to worry about is like it rotting. But if you have it in raised beds, it's really never gonna rot because it'll always have really great drainage. Um, but yeah, I think like chives, mountain mint, bone set. There's a bunch of plants that are really smelly that they're not going to go after because they don't like the way it smells. So you can plant kind of like a barrier around your garden, and that might help to mitigate that, or even just plant those big tall native grasses as like a barrier around whatever garden that you have, and that'll help keep them away or at least deter them. But a lot of times, in the beginning, you kind of just have to have fencing because they're relentless, these creatures. So one of the things that I mentioned before was rewilding or returning your land to meadow, which is probably what it was to begin with until we all built houses and put down lawns. Um, so when you're doing the rewilding and the return to meadow, um, you want to first smother the lawn, like we talked about, like kill the lawn. And then you want to use like a native seed mix. You never want to use like a wildflower mix from a box store or a place online, because a lot of times those don't have native seeds from our area. And sometimes they even have invasive seeds that maybe they're not invasive to like where they manufactured it, but they're invasive for here. So I always buy my flower seeds, Hudson Valley Seed Company, which actually I'm gonna show you guys. Um, I'm gonna pull it up and show you because it really is like a great. They have such great options, and they even have like a local eco type that they sell. I'm gonna try to find it and just show you guys really quick because uh flowers. Here we go. Seed collections. This must be it, right? I know you can't see it yet. I just didn't share my screen yet, but pollinator friendly. No, I don't know. Maybe I can't find it. Here we go. Okay, let me just share this screen so you guys can see what I'm talking about. Here it is. Okay. So if you take a look here, this is Hudson Valley Seed Company. They're super uh reliable. They have great products. I've never had an issue with them. And they're local. So they have this collection of seeds that are a local ecotype. So they are like especially great for the pollinators in our area. Um, Here, let's take a look. There's that bone set that I was talking about. It's really pretty. I think it's really pretty anyway. Okay, so yeah, so the local ecotype seed is of Hudson Valley wild origin and has been scaled for production on our farm in Accord. So they have a farm up here in Accord. I've never been to their store actually, but they have this project. They're working with this project. It's pollinatehv.org. Um, so yeah, it just provides local ecotypes of seeds so that we can better support the pollinators and the wildlife, and they'll probably do much better in our area. You know, it's kind of like foolproof a little bit because you can, like there's plants that are, able to grow anywhere from zone 3 to 9, but that doesn't mean if you go and take the seed from zone 3 that it's going to do great in like a zone 6 because it's used to that cold, that seed variety, that heirloom has been in that climate for, however long, and you're going to do better and have more success if you're planting a local ecotype. Okay, so let me go back to my this. Okay. 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 So yeah, I would suggest that you protect the area. When you're trying to re-meadow or get a meadow going again, you want to protect the area. And then once the growth hits about 12 inches, you want to mow it, which I was confused about this because I thought like, okay, yeah, it'll kill the weeds, but it'll also like it'll stop them from going to seed, but it's not gonna it's gonna like hurt the perennials too. And if I plant any annuals, it'll get rid of those. So I was like researching why you would mow it when once it hits 12 inches or like, in that first season. And it's a strategic practice to prevent annual weeds from producing seeds and to allow the establishment of the slower growing perennial wildflowers. So I guess this would be more for like the perennial wildflowers that you're planting. Um, And this height actually ensures that the meadow's ecosystem remains healthy and biodiverse. And it also mimics the grazing behavior of wild animals that might be eating the meadow. So they actually evolved to be like chomped down. So that's why we would mow it when it's about 12 inches high, because it's going to make it more robust and it's going to make it stronger and it'll get rid of those weed plants before they go to seed, hopefully. Um, the expectation, you need to kind of like set your expectations if you're creating a meadow in your area. Again, you only have to start with like, 10 by 10, 10 by 20, like a small area that feels manageable to you. But it's going to take a couple years to get it established. You're not really going to see that big, beautiful flower, those 4 or 6 foot tall like grasses and perennial flowers. You're not going to see that until year 2 or 3, I would say. So it's kind of a long game with the rewilding of your area, but it's definitely worth it. I mean, it's so beautiful. It's like I have actually I tried to put this in the I tried to put this picture in my presentation, but for some reason it wasn't letting me. So I'm just going to show you guys because it's really lovely. I don't know if it's even worth it to show you actually, because it looks like the color got weird. Um, yeah, I'll show it to you. Okay, so it's this. Um, the color got a little funny, so you can't really see like the black-eyed Susans, but you see it's just like it just looks beautiful to me. I mean, I don't know. To me it looks prettier than a lawn. I think it's really lovely and just the biodiversity and the usefulness and the wildlife habitat and the amount of pollinators and just all the things. The other thing is that if you have um like I always have an issue with wasps in my yard and I find that the more flowers I plant, the more they leave me alone. So, this is a great way to just give them their space and they will leave you alone. Um, yes. So, let me go back to my presentation. Sorry. Okay. Um, right. So those are the expectations for any sort of um meadow that you'd be doing. I would say to do a mix of annuals, perennials, and grasses. You definitely want those native grasses in there because they will provide structure and they are really great at absorbing water, and they are deer resistant. But you definitely want to check for invasives. If you're doing any sort of meadowing or wildflowers, you do not want to let these things take over your garden. So in the pictures on the left, on the top left, you have Japanese silkgrass, which will take over like in an instant. And then there's mugwort in the middle, and mustard garlic is at the bottom. And these are like insanely tenacious. Um, they are almost impossible to get rid of once they get established. It's really hard, especially once they go to seed. Once they go to seed, you're kind of doomed. So, I would say take a look for these, like especially in your garden. Make sure that they're not taking over any space in your yard at all. And I use plant net sometimes, and even like the seedlings that don't have any flowers or they don't have a lot of growth. Plant net is really, really good at identifying a lot of these plants and will usually have a correct um, identification. And actually, Cornell did a study a few years ago, and they found that PlantNet was the one that was the most accurate out of all of the plant ID apps. So definitely download that app if you need some help IDing. I mean, let's like perennials are crazy, right? Like when they are growing, you're like, is that a weed or a perennial? Is that a weed or a perennial? Like it's almost impossible to tell the difference unless you know what you planted, where you planted it, and you're like really familiar with it. It's really hard. I think that sometimes you could just use like let me just double check that and make sure that that's what I think it is because you don't want these taking over your garden. And here's some of the native grasses that I was talking about before. There's little blue stem, switchgrass, poverty oat grass, purple love grass, Indian grass. These are all native, mostly deer resistant, and they actually suppress weeds. They will add structure to your garden, structure to your meadow. And even if you just want to get rid of the lawn and just have a bunch of really beautiful ornamental grass growing and then like mulch around it or put stones around it, like that, this is the lovely option. And then again, the mountain mint and the bone set are deer resistant and they will help if you put like a barrier of them around. Um, and then for flowers, it's nice to always choose like a variety of flowers that will bloom all year or like, all, I would say season, but all the way from spring to fall. So, um, the wild columbines, I hate columbines, but they bloom early and they reseed all over the place. The coreopsis, golden alexanders, those are all like your early bloomers. And then mid-season, you have black-eyed Susans, which for me, they always bloom like all the way through October. So I guess I'm just lucky, but those establish really fast, so those are great. The wild bergamot is pollinator magnet. You can also make tea out of it. Common milkweed, do not make tea out of it. It will kill you because it's poisonous. Um, yes, be careful about that because a lot of people don't know that the monarch host flower is poisonous. So you want to be careful with kids or pets. Um, and then for late season, you have the New England aster, New York aster, showy goldenrod, or the grass leaf goldenrod, and those will bloom like, through October as well. And then this is like a seed pack that I made for my invasive species grant. So I give out like seed packs to help people kind of get started or, do what we talked about today and like get rid of some lawn and plant some native flower seeds. So if anybody comes to see me at any of my tabling events, either at the farmers markets or like I'll be at some throughout as the weather gets warmer, I'm going to be at the college for an event. I'll be at the Livingston Manor Library for an event, but also as soon as we open up the farmers market in Monticello, I'll be there every Wednesday. So you can come see me and I'll give you a pack of seeds so you can start your garden. And then I was just going to show you guys my native edible garden, which let me share it here. Mhm. Okay, so this is my native edible garden that I made at work. Don't mind I think they're irises. Don't mind those plants in the front. So I have pawpaw tree in here. I have a ton of blueberry. I have echinacea. I have strawberries. I have blueberries. I have what else? Red currants, pink currants, and these are all native edible plants that do really well in our soil, do really well in our area. I mean, like the best blueberries you've ever had, the high bush blueberries, they are just like they're so good. You do have to fence them in because like everything will eat them, the birds, the deer, everything. Um, but yeah, this is another recommendation of something else to do instead of lawn. Like all this area was lawn, and then we made it into a native edible garden. So eventually, when it grows in, I'll have like pawpaw fruit, which will be really cool. Um, and blueberries and the strawberries will have been getting bigger. Um, But yeah, I also have bee balm and echinacea and anise hyssop and the currant berries. So there's tons of native edibles. Um, if you wanted to go in that route also. Yes. Okay, so these I'll email out to you guys. These are just some resources. If anyone's familiar with Doug Tallamy, he does really great work. It's called like the Homegrown National Park, and he tries to promote people to do what we talked about, which is like get rid of your lawn and turn it into like native garden or plant native species. You don't have to get rid of the whole lawn, just any part of it will help because we're kind of in a biodiversity crisis globally. So anything that you can do to get rid of any sort of monoculture or like wasted space is a good thing that you're doing for your community and for the planet. There's a native plants finder that I'll send out. And then there's just like some information about rain gardens if you wanted to do that, because I know there's a lot of like wet soil up here in Sullivan County, especially. But I'll share all these resources with in an email later. And I think I'm running out of time, so that's it. If anybody has questions, you could put them in the chat. I really hope the chat is working. I don't know why it wouldn't be, but if it's not, you could just shoot me an email and ask your questions. Um, but yeah, that's all I have, and thank you for coming.